Right now, you can close a door. Think about how strange and powerful that is. If you want to be completely alone, to do literally anything without another human being seeing you, you can just walk into a room, shut a door, and vanish from the world. You do it so often you never think about it. The bathroom, your bedroom, a locked car, a bathroom stall in a crowded building. You are surrounded by little pockets of total privacy everywhere you go all day long. Now here's the thing that's going to reframe this entire video. For the overwhelming majority of human history, that door did not exist. Not the door, the concept. The idea of being truly, completely alone, unseen by another person, was almost unheard of. Oh, for hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors lived their entire lives in the constant, close, unbroken company of other people. They slept in a pile. They ate in a group. They worked shoulder to shoulder. And when they needed to do the things you'd never do in front of another soul, well, that's exactly the question, isn't it? Because we all have a private life. The things we do when we're sure no one is watching. And ancient humans had one too. But they had to live it in a world with no doors, no walls, no locks, and almost nowhere to hide. So what did they actually do in private, for intimacy, for grief, for secrets, for those small human moments we all need to keep to ourselves? And how on earth did they manage it when privacy as you know it simply didn't exist? This is a story about the most hidden part of being human. And it's stranger, funnier, and more relatable than you'd think. Let's start with the fact that reframes everything, because you need to feel how unusual your life is before you can understand theirs. You are one of the first humans in history to expect privacy as normal. Genuinely. The private bedroom, a room with a door that belongs to one person or one couple, is a shockingly recent luxury. For most of human history, and for most people even a few centuries ago, entire families slept together in a single room, often in a single bed. Kids, parents, grandparents, sometimes guests, sometimes the animals, all piled into one space. The idea that a child would have their own room with a door they could close would have struck almost every human who ever lived as bizarre, wasteful, and a little sad. Why would you want to be alone? Alone was dangerous. Alone was lonely. Alone was for outcasts. And if you go further back, before houses, before villages, into the deep hunter-gatherer past that shaped us, privacy gets even scarcer. Picture the actual living situation. A small band of people, a few dozen at most, everyone knowing everyone, living out in the open or in shared shelters. No separate rooms, no walls. You spent your entire life within eyeshot and earshot of other people, from the day you were born to the day you died. The anthropologists who've lived with the last such societies describe it vividly. Life is lived in public. Almost everything you do, someone sees. Almost everything you say, someone hears. So sit with that for a second, because it's genuinely hard for a modern brain to grasp. You have probably spent more hours completely alone in the last month than an ancient human spent alone in a year, maybe in a decade. Solitude, for them, was rare, brief, and often a little frightening, which means the private life, the hidden self, the things done unseen, had to survive in the tiny cracks of a life that was almost entirely visible. And the biggest crack, the one reliable place a human could disappear, was the one we've talked about before: the dark. If you can't build a wall, you wait for the sun to go down. For ancient humans, darkness was privacy. It was the closest thing they had to closing a door. When night fell and the world went black, really black, the kind of dark we almost never experience anymore, the group's endless watching eyes finally went dark too. You still weren't alone, exactly. People slept close for warmth and safety. But in the dark, pressed together around a dying fire, you had something you didn't have all day. You could not be seen. And that's where the private life lived. In whispers. Two people murmuring to each other in the black, having the one kind of conversation that couldn't happen in the daylight. The confession, the complaint about someone sleeping 10 feet away, the plan, the flirtation, the argument you didn't want the whole group to hear. The night was when you could say the quiet part. It was the only time your words belonged just to you and one other person. And yes, the night is also, obviously, when the most private human activity of all took place. Let's just be honest about it, because it's the elephant in the room and it's genuinely interesting. In a world with no bedrooms and no doors, intimacy happened in the dark, quietly, close to other sleeping people, because there was simply nowhere else and no other time. The privacy wasn't spatial. You couldn't go to another room. The privacy was the darkness itself, and a kind of shared, polite agreement not to notice. Every human group has unspoken rules about this. You pretend not to hear, you look away. You grant people the fiction of being alone even when they're a few feet from you. That quiet social contract, I won't notice if you won't, might be one of the oldest and most important courtesies our species ever invented. It's how you give someone privacy when there are no walls to give it to them. So the first answer to what did they do in private is really what did they do in the dark, because darkness was the only private room they had. But the night couldn't cover everything. Some things you need to do in the daytime. And for those, ancient humans got creative. Here's something we forget. To get any privacy at all, ancient humans had to physically leave. There was no shutting yourself in. If you wanted to be unseen, your only option was to put distance between yourself and everyone else. To walk away out of sight and come back. And there were plenty of everyday reasons to do exactly that. The most obvious one, which every single human deals with and nobody in the ancient world could do in front of the group. Going to the bathroom. There was no toilet, no outhouse, no little room. When you needed to go, you walked away from camp, far enough for decency, close enough for safety, and you did your business out in nature, then came back. It sounds trivial, but think about what it means. One of the most basic, universal, private human functions required a small journey, every single time, for your entire life. And it came with real risk. Stepping away from the group, especially at night, meant stepping toward the predators and dangers the group protected you from. People almost certainly went in pairs sometimes, or stayed close, precisely because slipping away to be alone was never fully safe. Even your most private moment had a bodyguard, or at least a buddy waiting nearby. But slipping away wasn't only about necessity. It was also how you got the rarest luxury of all. A moment to yourself. We know from studying hunter-gatherer life that people did find little pockets of solitude, walking to gather food alone, sitting apart for a while, taking the long way back. These weren't dramatic escapes. They were the small, precious minutes of being unobserved that every human needs and that were genuinely hard to come by. A few quiet moments by a stream, a solo walk to check a trap. The human need to occasionally not be around other people is real and ancient, and in a life lived almost entirely in company, those stolen minutes of solitude would have felt precious in a way we can barely imagine, because we're drowning in alone time and they were starving for it. There's a lovely irony there. We spend fortunes and build entire homes to get away from each other, and then we feel lonely. They spent their whole lives desperate for 5 minutes alone and were almost never lonely at all. Same species. Opposite problems real quick. If you're enjoying this little tour of the hidden human life, do me a favor and hit subscribe. This channel is all about the surprising truth of how our ancestors actually lived, and there's a new story every week. That's it, back to it. Now here's a kind of privacy that has nothing to do with walls or darkness, and it might be the most important one of all. Because even when you can be seen every second of every day, there's one place no one can ever follow you, inside your own head. Think about it. When you can't have physical privacy, when someone is always watching your body, the only truly private space left is your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, the things you never say out loud. And ancient humans living in a world with almost no physical privacy would have had an incredibly rich, guarded inner life, precisely because it was the one thing that was fully theirs. The grudge you held but never voiced, the person you secretly loved or secretly couldn't stand, the fear you didn't want to admit, the dream you had and told no one. In a life lived completely in the open, the human mind became the last private room, the one door that always locked, and this matters more than it sounds, because it may be part of why we became such deep, complicated, inward creatures. When you can't act privately, you learn to think privately. You develop a hidden self that doesn't match the face you show the group. You get good at concealment, at reading others, at keeping your real thoughts behind your eyes. Some of the richness of human inner life, the fact that you are, right now, a whole secret world that no one else can fully see, might have been sharpened by hundreds of thousands of years of having nowhere else to hide but inside, which leads to something a lot of people don't think about. In a tiny group where everyone sees everything, secrets become incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous. Imagine living somewhere where everyone knows everything about you. Everyone saw what you did today. Everyone knows who you talked to, what you ate, how you behaved, whether you pulled your weight. There is no anonymity, there is no fresh start. Your reputation is everything, and it's on display, always. In that world, a secret, something you manage to keep hidden, is one of the most valuable and volatile things you can possess. Oh, maybe you took a little more food than your share when you thought no one was looking. Maybe you have feelings for someone you shouldn't. Maybe you made a mistake on a hunt and covered it up. Maybe you know something about someone else that they'd rather stay buried. In a small, tightly bound group where survival depends on everyone trusting everyone, keeping a secret and discovering someone else's, carried enormous weight. Gossip wasn't idle chatter. It was the flow of hidden information through the group, and it could lift you up or destroy you. This is a private life of a completely different kind. Not the privacy of the body, but the privacy of information. The careful management of what people know about you. And ancient humans would have been absolute masters at it, far better than we are, because they had to be. When you can never physically hide, controlling what others know becomes a life skill. Who you tell, what you admit, what you take to your grave, the face you present versus the truth underneath. We think of ourselves as sophisticated social creatures, but the person navigating a modern office is playing a simple version of a game our ancestors played for their actual survival, every single day, with people they could never get away from. So the private life of an ancient human wasn't just about intimate moments in the dark. It was an entire hidden layer of held secrets, guarded feelings, and carefully managed reputation, running silently beneath a life that was otherwise lived completely in the open. Let's bring it back to the small, tender, universal stuff. Because this is where you realize how much you have in common with someone who lived 100,000 years ago: grief. When someone you loved died, you'd want a moment alone with that feeling. But ancient humans grieved largely in the open, together, because there was nowhere private to fall apart. And yet there's evidence they did seek out private, tender moments with their dead. Careful, deliberate burials, bodies arranged gently, sometimes with flowers or precious objects, in quiet places. Some of the most moving discoveries in all of archaeology are these small, private acts of love. Someone taking the time, away from the bustle, to lay a loved one to rest with obvious care. That's a private moment reaching across 100,000 years, and you'd recognize it instantly. Vanity. Yes, really. We've found evidence of ancient humans grooming themselves, using pigments to decorate their bodies, arranging ornaments, caring about how they looked. And a lot of that fussing over yourself is a quietly private act. The ancient equivalent of checking yourself in a mirror when you think no one's watching. The desire to look good, to present a certain self, to privately tend to your own appearance. That's not modern vanity. That's a 100,000-year-old human habit. Comfort. The small private things people do to soothe themselves. Humming, fidgeting, a favorite spot to sit, a habit of touching a particular stone or object. We can't dig these up, but we can be almost certain they existed, because they're universal to humans everywhere. The private ritual that calms you down. The little thing you do just for you. Your ancestors had their versions, and they'd understand yours completely. And here's the quiet punchline of all of it. The content of the ancient private life, love, grief, vanity, secrets, the need to occasionally be alone with your own thoughts, is almost identical to yours. What's completely different is the conditions. They had all the same private needs you have. They just had almost none of the privacy you take for granted to meet them. They had to build their hidden lives out of darkness, distance, silence, and the inside of their own skulls. So step back and look at the whole strange picture, because there's something genuinely thought-provoking in it. We won. In the privacy department, modern humans have won so completely it's almost absurd. You have more solitude, more secrecy, more ability to be unseen than any human who has ever lived. You can close a door and disappear anytime you like. You can be a completely different person online than you are in the room. You can keep entire lives hidden. The private space our ancestors could only dream of, we swim in. But, and you knew there'd be a but, we might have overshot. Because those same ancestors, with almost no privacy at all, had something we increasingly don't. They were never, ever alone. Never unseen didn't just mean never private. It also meant never abandoned, never isolated, never facing the dark by yourself. Every private need they had was met inside a web of people who knew them completely. And we've traded that. We built ourselves so many walls and doors and private rooms that a lot of us now sit behind them, perfectly private and perfectly lonely, with more solitude than any human ever wanted and less connection than every human before us had by default. Their problem was that they could never get away from each other. Ours is that we finally can, and did. And now we're not sure how to get back. So the next time you close a door and the whole world drops away and you're completely, gloriously alone, enjoy it. It's a luxury almost no human in history ever had. But maybe notice too what it cost. Because for 300,000 years, humans had no privacy and were never lonely. And we have all the privacy in the world. The private life was never really about the walls. It was about which parts of yourself you choose to hide and which you let another person see. They did it in the dark, in whispers, in the silence of their own minds. We do it behind doors and screens, but it's the same secret, tender, hidden self. We just finally got a room of our own to keep it in.